Hey, and with that, good evening and welcome from Phoenixville Public Library. I'm Mark Pinto. Glad to have all of you with us tonight. If the last couple of years have taught us anything, it's definitely the need to be resilient, and that is the topic of tonight's program. We explore resilience and how you can build and develop it with our guest, Nancy L. Miller, who is a registered nurse who currently serves others through life coaching, grief recovery, and speaking to folks like you. So welcome, Nancy, and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you and to present on this topic. Why do you need resilience now? And I think we can probably all agree that it's been a challenging season, and challenging seasons can be stressful, but we can grow in those challenging seasons as we build resilience. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the topic of resilience. We're going to look at what it is, the definition of it, why we need it, how we can build it, some strategies that you can use. And Mark and I, as we planned this, we wanted to make it a little bit interactive. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share some content, and then periodically throughout the presentation, we're going to pause and we're going to do some actual mindfulness and resilience exercises that you can incorporate into your daily life. We're also going to talk a little bit about the concept of hope, because most of us could use some hope right now. And so, I'm not sure why you decided to sign up for this presentation, but we all need a little more resilience this year more than ever because of what we've experienced in the past 18 months. It's been a challenging season. And, we don't see your faces. Some of you, we see your pictures, but as you look around the room and you see names and you might see a picture, you have no idea. We have no idea what each person has experienced in these past 18 months. Some have maybe had a really, really difficult, challenging time. I know a few people who sadly lost loved ones during this time. Some had experienced the death of a loved one from COVID. Some experienced the death of a loved one from other diseases. And so that can be very difficult. One thing we do know about grief and mourning is that resilient people do mourn their losses and do learn how to grieve and mourn their losses. So while this has been an uncertain time, and there still is some uncertainty remaining, life, and we don't know when life will come back to some semblance of normal, there are actions you can take to develop resilience in your own life and so you can adapt well to the circumstances that you experience. So as we take a look at this topic, I'm not a resilience expert. As Mark said, my background is in nursing. Currently, I do life coaching and grief recovery. I'm not an expert on resilience. I'm not an expert on mindfulness, but one of my strengths is a learner strength. And so I have gathered a lot of information, and I've done my best to keep it a broad overview of this big topic of resilience, because it is so vast. The body of knowledge about resilience is so vast that we can't possibly cover it in 45 minutes, but we're going to take a look at it, and I'm going to go some concepts that you, as I said, you can incorporate into your own life so that you can build your own resilience strategies as you go forward. So what is resilience? Well, it's a couple of things. And we can think of it this way. We can think of it as it's a muscle that we can build. And we can also think of it as a skill that we can develop. On the previous slide, you saw that I said resilience is individualized. And so, but we can build it. And if you like to exercise, that builds muscles and it builds muscle strength. And that's very important for your well-being. We can also, resilience isn't really a muscle, but we can build it and do things to build it as if it were a muscle so that we have that some more strength. it's also a skill. We can think of it as a skill that we can develop. Now, I'm not a great gardener at all. I wish I was. My grandmother was a great gardener, but I'm not. And I have this picture of the bonsai here because my understanding and some people I know's their experience trying to grow bonsai can be difficult and can require some learning, but it is a skill that can be developed. So what is resilience? The American Psychological Association defines resilience as the ability to adapt in the aftermath of trauma or extreme stress and to preserve a high level of functioning. And so it is an important skill, and numerous studies show it's a skill that we can build. And dictionary.com says that resilience is the ability of a person to adapt or to recover readily from an illness, from adversity, and from major life changes. And I think we can all agree that we've had some adversity and some life changes in this past year and a half. It's important also to know that studies show that about 90% of us, that's a lot, that's almost everyone, will experience at least one traumatic event in our lifetime. So what do we do with that information? Well, and some of us will experience more than one traumatic event, but for most people, initially, it's very difficult in the beginning, and feeling overwhelmed, feeling negative emotions, and that can be really challenging and difficult in the beginning. But some people who experience trauma, these kinds of events, unfortunately develop a long-term negative, they have a long-term negative impact on their life. But others who are initially deeply distressed and feel that overwhelm and all of that, they can recover significantly, and they go on to lead happy, healthy, productive lives. And one of the key distinctions is that those people who go on to lead happy, healthy, productive lives, those people are resilient. They possess the quality of resilience. So that's a broad overview of resilience. And so we're going to go into our first exercise about resilience. And if, as I think all of you have your screen turned off, and you probably have your mic off. So this strategy is breathing, deep breathing. It's a mindful resilience strategy. And if you're not familiar with the term mindfulness, just think of it as being fully present in the moment. Some people think it's a term of religion, but it's really a term that just means being fully present. It's not a religious term, and it's a term to just be in the moment. So we'll think of it that way. And the idea of deep breathing, because these stressful events happen in life, no matter what, no matter who you are or what you're experiencing, 90% have a traumatic event. Now, we're not talking just traumatic events, but you can use this for small stressors or other stressors that are more significant. So I'm going to invite you to think about where you would fit, and you can go ahead and put this in the chat, where you would fit on this scale of resilience. Do you think you're a 1, like 1 through 10? Do you think you're a 1? And I won't be able to see the chat right now, but we'll take a look at it at the end. But do you think you're a 1 on resilience, or are you high on resilience? That's at a 10. And also think about what the impact how difficult this past year and a half has been for you. Has it been a minor impact, a 1, or has it been a 10, a major impact on your life? Or is it whatever number in between there? So if you're comfortable sharing that in the chat, go ahead and do that. And then when you're ready, and if there's no medical reason for you to not participate in this, then I'm inviting you to put one hand on your heart and one hand on your abdomen. So what we're going to do with this deep breath, the deep breathing, is a way to just calm our nervous system. Okay. So notice how you feel right now before we start the deep breathing. And then notice how you feel after we do some deep breathing. So you can put one hand on your heart, one hand on your abdomen. And what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And so just inhale through your nose. And as you do that, notice your chest expand. And then exhale through your mouth and notice your belly expand. And then we'll do that again to breathe in through the nose, deep breath. Notice your chest expanding and out through your mouth and notice your belly expanding. And now just pause for a minute or a few seconds and just see if you do feel better. Now, while your hand is still on your heart, I'm going to move mine off of my heart because I invite you to, I'm going to introduce this concept of self-compassion, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on in the presentation. But self-compassion is really another key strategy for developing resilience and boosting it. But so with your hand on your heart, you can say this to yourself, and it may feel awkward, and maybe you don't want to say it. It might feel weird at first, but it's a way to practice self-compassion. And so you can put your hand on your heart and you can, with your microphone off, say, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you be safe, and may you feel loved. And we're not going to repeat that a number of times, but if you were doing that on your own at home, you could repeat that several times. And then the next exercise for deep breathing that I want to show you is Foursquare Breathing. I learned this in a nursing seminar, and I've taught it to a number of people and posted it on my Facebook page. So it's basically what it says. It's four step breathing, Foursquare breathing. So sit quietly with you can put your hands on your legs, your feet on the floor, and you're going to breathe into the count of 4 and out to the count of 4. And so you'll breathe in, and then I'll walk you through it. So I'm not going to do it because I'll be counting, but I'll do the counting. So it'll be inhale 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then pause for 4. So we'll go ahead and do that to breathe in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, and pause 2, 3, 4. Again, inhale 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, exhale 2, 3, 4, and pause 2, 3, 4. So that's an example, 2 examples of deep breathing that you can do. And as I said, that will help to calm your nervous system. So the next thing I want to say about breath too is that Dr. Charles Stone, who's written some books about mindfulness, and he's a coach, trainer, and a coach. He, if you want to take notes, I didn't put this on a slide, but you can take notes. So he uses an acronym to describe mindfulness, and the B is for body, R is for relationships, E is for environment, A is for affective awareness or your emotions, T is for thoughts, and the H is for heart, and the E is for engage. So that is his acronym he developed for mindfulness. So if resilience is important for life, and these are some of the benefits. It's a skill which everybody can benefit from. So whether you came to this and feel like you're high resilience or you're not so high on resilience, there's hope for you. There's hope for all of us because it's a skill we can build. And it's an important skill to build. And there's a lot of work that's been done on the topic of resilience. They have done training for students in schools. When I worked in the school districts, we had a lot of training about resilience. So the students can be trained. They provide resilience programs for healthcare workers. They do a lot of work with resilience veterans. And so whether you're young, old, middle-aged, it's a skill that can be learned and developed. And why is it important to build this resilience? So one reason is that it can lead to success in life. According to an article in hrdive.com, people who were resilient and they boosted their revenue growth. So they had more money, the more growth in their company. Resilient leaders were less likely to burn out. That's an important thing, very important. Resilient workers scored higher on creativity and flexibility. And they also, again, similar to the company having revenue growth, they also had more income, greater income and more money than their less resilient coworkers. So that sounds a little bit like some aspects of success. Another benefit of resilience is the multiple health benefits. So resilience is good for your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your social health, all of those parts of who you are and what makes up your health. Interestingly, also in some of the studies about veterans, they've found that veterans who experience a difficult experience who were healthy when that happened, they had more resilience afterwards. So staying healthy, becoming healthy is important. And so I don't know if it's a case of which came first, I don't know, but the healthier ones then developed more resilience and were better off after a difficult experience. But building resilience also has health benefits. So some of the health benefits it has is that as you learn to manage stress, you're less likely to experience those negative diseases, those diseases that come from negative stress, like hypertension and the other diseases that can occur from chronic stress. You have people who are resilient also had less absenteeism in some studies, and they had reduced risk of behaviors that were high risk behaviors, such as excessive alcohol use or smoking or use of drugs. And so resilient people also have lower levels of depression, and they may have greater longevity, according to an article in the Harvard Health. So you can see that resilience does have multiple health benefits. And resilience also results in greater life satisfaction. That's one of the things that they found in the Harvard Health article that I read, but they also, people who are resilient adapt well to adversity, and then they have a better, more positive outlook on life. And they have as I said, a lower rate of depression, and they have that awareness that, okay, I've got through that, I can get through something else. And some of the strategies that people use to build resilience, like humor and gratitude, those also help to build and to have a greater satisfaction with life. So those are some ways that you can ways you benefit from building resilience and why it's important. And so let's take a look now at one more strategy for building resilience, which is there's multiple strategies here for building resilience. And so we're going to talk briefly about each one. I'm just going to mention them here, but then we're going to take a deeper look at them as we go through today's presentation. So self-care is a really important strategy for building resilience. If you manage your health, take care of yourself, then you will have more resilience and better health going into an adverse situation. Now, I'm definitely an advocate of self-care. That's one of my main topics, about which I speak and write. And some people call me a coach, but it's self-care is such a big topic too, like resilience, and it's not all going to the spa and paying high dollar amounts of money for some spa treatments. That can be part of it if that's in your budget and that's something you enjoy, but it can be very simple. It can be these things we're doing here today, like the deep breathing and some of the other activities that we're going to engage in. Self-awareness is also part of building resilience, and people who are self-aware know what their strengths are and they can tap into them. And self-management, which we're going to talk a little bit about. Self-compassion we touched on, but we're going to talk about more. And another one is strengthening social connections. Now that's really, really important. Strengthening social connections is so important for resilience. It's so important for health and well-being. And mindfulness is important for building resilience. So all of these things that we can do to build resilience don't have to take a ton of time. And so we're going to take a minute now to do another brief exercise, which is a muscle relaxation exercise. So go ahead and in your seated position, just put your hands on your legs, and you can close your eyes and go ahead and take 1 or 2 deep breaths. And then I'm going to teach this to you, and then you can do it and continue doing it. But just clench your fists, just clench your fists and feel that tension, and then just release it. Just release that. And then go ahead and tighten the muscles in your arms, completely your lower arms, your upper arms, like as if you're lifting up something heavy, and just relax them and release that tension. And then your shoulders, we're going to lift your shoulders up and hold them tight for 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and then just release it. And just notice the difference. As we do that, just notice the difference that you feel from those brief muscle relaxation techniques. So self-care is a very important resilience strategy. And part of self-care is being self-aware of who you are, of your strengths, of what makes you uniquely you, your values, your strengths. It's also knowing whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. So, are you a glass half full or glass half empty kind of person? Are you introverted or extroverted? And knowing and noticing your emotions, that's where mindfulness can come in too, to what are the emotions that I'm feeling. So part of self-care is, besides the things that cost money or the things that most of us feel like we don't have enough time to do, like exercising and all those things. These are simple things that don't take a lot of time or money, but just take paying attention and being mindful. So I'm going to teach you one thing about your emotions that I learned in a brain coaching class. So David Rock, in his book, Your Brain at Work, talked about this. And so you're going to name that, I call it name that state. You might have heard some people say name it and tame it, but resilience and self-care and all of these things affect not just our physical body, but they affect our mind, our emotions, our mental well-being, our stress levels, our social health. So with this name that state emotion technique, it's just a very simple way to recognize and identify your emotion and then decide what to do with it or how to manage it. So many people through the pandemic felt the emotion of loneliness, right? And go ahead, you can write in the chat what emotion you might have felt during the pandemic. But a lot of people experienced loneliness, even people who are introverts, which have felt some loneliness during the pandemic. And so when you feel that emotion, if you don't identify it or acknowledge it, it can begin to really, your brain can begin to release a lot of neurochemicals that can produce stress and other things. So, but if you name it and you identify the emotion, it takes it out of that emotional part of your brain and it moves it to the prefrontal cortex part of your brain, which is the executive function part of your brain, where you can decide what you want to do with that emotion that you're experiencing. And so let's just say it's loneliness. So you can decide, do I want to make a phone call? Do I want to text someone? Do I want to invite a friend to go out to take a walk? One of my friends who lives alone, what she did during the pandemic, she and another friend would meet together by Zoom and they would do cooking, and that's how they connected. So once you identify the emotion, then you can decide what to do with it. So that's that under the self-awareness and the awareness, just being aware of your emotions and then being aware of your strengths. Part of self-care is also self-management. So saying yes and saying no. And many people have a hard time saying no. People who are busy people who are high achievers, people who serve in their family, their workplace. Sometimes it's difficult to say no, but it's important to recognize that it's okay to say yes and it's okay to say no. And just to notice just that mindfulness too. How do I feel when I said yes to doing that? Or how do I feel when I said no to doing that? And then our time, our energy, our emotions, our schedule, we have limited resources. They're limited resources. So it's important that we manage those so that we aren't on the verge of burning out. And that will help us to develop resilience, and it will help us to keep from burning out. And then the last piece of self-care that I want to cover here is self-compassion. So this is based on the work of Kristen Neff, who has studied self-compassion for about 20 years. And she talks about it being kindness towards yourself versus self-judgment. And being kind to yourself is super important to develop that self-compassion. So, most of us, and I think Brene Brown says this, something like, talk to yourself like you would to someone you love. And so just notice what you're feeling, acknowledge it, and not judge yourself, and just to be kind and compassionate to yourself. And then common humanity versus isolation. So that is being aware that we're not the only person experiencing the same thing. Sometimes, especially in isolation and COVID, you may feel like you're the only one experiencing that, but other people are probably having similar experiences. And so that idea of common humanity and mindfulness versus over-identification. And so over-identification is, you want to be balanced. You don't want to over-identify with your emotions. Once you identify them and recognize what they are, you don't want to over-identify with them. You're not your emotions, okay? Your emotions are just messengers, and you're not your emotions. So, but just be aware of them. What are those emotions I'm feeling? And so that is based on Kristen Neff's work about self-compassion. So here's a card. I have this whole deck of self-compassion cards. I don't know if you can see them on the screen there, but this is another one of those cards, self-compassion cards. And this one is never alone. So it says to bring to mind a somewhat stressful situation in your life. And then ask yourself the question, are you really alone with it? Who else, strangers or friends, might share a similar stress? So think about that for a minute or so, a few seconds. And most of us, we're all going through this experience in 2021. Now, my perspective is that no two people are having the exact same experience, but we are all going through this similar experience, and there are a lot of things in common that we're having with each other about this experience of the global pandemic and being in our confined to our homes, or just all the changes that have occurred. And so you want to be aware of what your experience. There may be others who are going through it, and there may be others then who can support you as you go through what you're going through. So self-care is a resilience strategy. And as I said, there's a lot of things we can do for self-care. And one of the things that I learned from Dr. John Preston in a seminar about habits of stress resilient people was this technique, this idea to exercise, to get outside for 10 minutes. Now, if your physician would permit you to do that, it's not contraindicated for any health conditions that you might have with your body or with your eyesight. He recommends 10 minutes of brisk walking outdoors without sunglasses, so that you get that exposure to light, and that it can really be beneficial for you. And I do that myself, if I'm working from home and sometimes I need a break out and I may not have a big window of time, I'll just take a walk, go outside and take a walk for a brief walk, 10 minutes, set the timer, 5 minutes one way, and then back to the house, 5 minutes the other way. And so that can be, sometimes we think we need, 30 minutes or an hour, but just 10 minutes can really be beneficial. And if you're interested in some other strategies about self-care, there is a free download available if you go to my website, where I talk about self-care essentials. And those are exercise and sleep are two of those. Sleep is really important for our resilience, because all of the sleep and the exercise, and of course what we eat too, but those affect our brain and our body. And that's really important, that we are keeping our brain and our body healthy. So sleep, I do a whole seminar on sleep, and we're not going to go into all that today, but it's important to have a sleep routine with regular hours, and to limit caffeine at night, and all of those things, which most of you probably know. So we'll leave it there for that. But if you want to participate here, to just experience briefly, very briefly, what it's like to move. So I learned this at a seminar on stress reduction. It was actually a whole conference, and some things stick with you. And this was one of those things that stayed with me. And he had us do some movement in our seat, some exercise in our seat. So if your health would permit you to do it and you want to participate, just very gently at your seat here, just move your hands and move your legs and feet as if you're walking. So we're doing chair walking. And you can see I'm moving on the screen because I'm doing it. So just do it slowly, slowly, slowly. And then you can increase your speed. And then we could keep doing that for a longer period of time, but I just wanted to demonstrate that to you as an idea of something that you can do, even if you can't get outside at work. Like, I don't know what your work situation is or your home situation, but if you can't get outside, you can do it in your office or walk down the hall. And just walking can help be beneficial for you, for your body and your brain. There's a whole body of research on that. So let's talk a little bit more about mindfulness and what it is. And so I love this picture. I don't know if you're cat people or dog people, or if you have, cats or dogs or pets or other pets, but I thought this picture showed mindfulness in a positive way that we could relate to. So notice just savoring the moment. That's what mindfulness is, just savoring the moment and thinking about this picture. Think about the young girl here with her cat, and what might that feel like? How soft is the fur? How, is it warm? And just being intentional and on purpose and paying attention in the present moment. Mindfulness, just, it's so good for us to just pause and slow down and just be, because we're so busy doing. And so just being in the moment and just taking a moment. Sometimes I say, take a moment so you don't have a moment. And you can just practice mindfulness anywhere. And again, it's that accepting yourself with kindness, that self-compassion. What mindfulness does is it brings our body back to rest, that state of rest. So when we are experiencing something challenging, our body can go into that fight, flight, freeze mode. And so when we do some of these things like the deep breathing or just the noticing, the noticing and being in the moment, it helps to regulate our body. It helps to calm our nervous system. And there are other mindful practices that we can develop, such as mindful breathing. Besides the mindful breathing, we can have mindful eating. And, so many times when we're and we aren't pausing long enough, sometimes we eat and we haven't even noticed the taste of the food or the warmth of the food or the flavor and the was it crunchy or was it soft? And there's just there's a whole exercise about mindful eating that you can try with, if you want to, with a raisin or a chocolate covered raisin, but we're not going to do that today because I didn't want to take too much time with that. But just noticing, like, what does it look like? What does it smell like? And so being mindful, savor the moments, like the moments even with your pets or with your family, your loved ones, just noticing, on how do I feel? What am I thinking? And what are my thoughts about this? And just being fully present and at rest with just being. And most of us struggle with that because many of us are used to doing and used to just going. And so but this is not a either or. This is I can be mindful in the midst of my day. I can be mindful in the midst of my work life. I can be mindful in the midst of my home life. And so just be aware of that. So I have a glass of water with me. If you have water with you, what you can do, and I'm going to hold up my water and you can see it. And so you can notice, and on the screen, I don't know if you can see that well, but there's an image of a glass of water. So notice that. And how full do you think the glass is? So, the optimist it's half full, and the pessimist probably thinks it's half empty. But the best news, so it really doesn't matter. And this is one of the key concepts I talk about self-care, because it's refillable. So if you feel like you're running on empty, you're feeling like you're drained, you can get rejuvenated, you can get refilled. And so if you have something to drink, if you have some water, or you have some, decaf tea, or you have something next to you, just take a sip of that. And I'm not going to do that tonight, but take a sip of it. Notice the temperature, notice what it tastes like. I like to flavor my water sometimes with, infuse some mint or some fruits in it. Just notice it, taste the taste of it, the sensation. And then hydration is super important. So because dehydration can impact our cognition and our mood. So you want to stay hydrated. And then you want to really, this is really important, is to strengthen social connections. So resilience and relationships are hugely important. And this is what the research says, that whether you're married or socially connected, that married or socially connected veterans had higher resilience. And most of us, in this area, we remember Superstorm Sandy, and the people who went through Superstorm Sandy found that their neighbors, their family, their friends, the EMS, that was what was important to them. And in a 2015 study they found that just a single supportive friendship helped young people in impoverished circumstances. It helped them to survive. And close or best friendships helped to build resilience, was a protective mechanism for adults. And I don't know if you are familiar with the Mediterranean lifestyle, but that has a lot of health benefits. And one of the key components of the Mediterranean lifestyle, besides the food that they eat, is the social gathering and eating together. So strengthening those social connections. So when we think about resilience, we think we can build it, we can develop it. And it can be empowering to think that we have a different perspective. So in this slide, you're in the middle there, and there are some things you can do kind of to help to understand that you're not a victim of the circumstances, that you can do some things to develop resilience. Some of these are the strategies that can be developed along with the ones we've already talked about. Gratitude helps with building resilience. So does humor. It helps to build resilience. And in this day and age, you know, if you don't have a great sense of humor, or you can find things online that are funny, or go watch a comedy show, or pick up a book about jokes. But there are ways to develop humor, gratitude. Maintaining a perspective is beneficial. Doing those things we talked about to sustain well-being, like getting enough sleep, exercising, eating well, practicing self-care. And another thing that helps people is if they can make meaning and purpose out of what happened. So we're going to look at that a little bit more, but how making meaning of the circumstances. A lot of times we ask the question, why? And that if we stay in the why question, it can be challenging. But if we can move to asking how can I live now? That can help us to gain a new perspective and to have purpose in our life. So there's a couple of graphics, you can do some searches and find them. But when we talk about choice and we talk about control, we're not in control of the pandemic. None of us are. We're not in control of certain things in our life. But there are things within our circle of influence, within our life, within our home, our family, that we do have a bit of an element of control and choice about. The things outside of our circle, there's things we're not in control of. Actions of others, people's perceptions of us, or people's perceptions of the world events, the weather. You know, there are a lot of things outside of our circle that we are not in control of, but we can be focused and develop resilience to help us to build those resilience skills and do the things that can help us to live well and to have a life of well-being. I was listening to a podcast the other week, and the gentleman on the podcast said that we were not designed and wired and made to have connection with people all over the world. And so sometimes that might be difficult, just having all that input. You know, I'm connected to people through Facebook that are across the country. So there were fires going on, there was an earthquake in Haiti, there was people that they know that were ill, there was things that had happened in Afghanistan, and all of that stuff. If you're an empathetic person and you care deeply about people and you take that all on, it can become too much to carry, and you can't control it, but you can control your world. So sometimes it's a matter of turning off some of the technology. And sometimes it's a matter of just building the connections around you. Like, okay, things are good in my corner of the world, and not being caught up in what's happening in all the other corners of the world. Not to say we don't care, but we cannot do something about everything that happens in the world, and it can become difficult and for us if we think that we carry all that and we take it all in. So just be wise, that part of wisdom about is this a strength, and am I able to manage listening to all this, or do I need to pause the social media and the news and things like that and just limit what I take in? We can reframe what we see happening or what our personal experiences are. And so when we do that, and I think this picture says it well, it's a guy who stands up and he's looking out the window. And so when we can reframe a situation and we look at it differently, we get a new perspective on it, and we could see beyond what's happening. And I talked about that a little bit, like we sometimes ask the why question, but sometimes we can shift to how. And in my work with people as a coach, we talk about possibility thinking. So what does this make possible? So here's an example about the pandemic. So what did the pandemic has been difficult, right? These 18 months, it's been difficult. But what did it make possible? So it made possible that many families had more time together at home. And if that was a healthy family unit, they enjoyed that time together at home. It made possible that people were able to take up a new hobby. I have a friend who began baking bread, and she makes this incredible, beautiful loaves of bread. Another friend of mine went back to, she's a nurse, but she went and got a realtor's license. So what does it make possible? And if we have that possibility thinking, then that can help us to build resilience. So these are some things that we can cultivate to continue to build resilience. We can cultivate courage. We can be brave and face our fears. I'm not talking about doing something dangerous or high risk, but just facing simple fears. So for example, here's one for me that, years ago, as a very young, I don't know, in my early 20s, I had to drive across the Pennsylvania Turnpike from, near Pittsburgh to this area all by myself. And that was challenging. I was like, oh my gosh, how could I do this? But I did it. I was afraid, but I did it. I took the right actions and steps and precautions, and I did it. And then now I've driven halfway across the country a couple of times. And so we can be brave and courageous. And when we step outside of our comfort zone, it also builds I'll call it the courage muscle, but trying something, stepping out and trying a new hobby, there's multitude of things that we can do to take small steps outside of our comfort zone. And we talked about compassion towards yourself and towards others. That's important to cultivate, that we love others and show them kindness and compassion, that we have it with ourselves, for ourselves. And staying connected with people, with nature, and with our purpose. Getting outside is so important. There are some physicians who prescribe therapy, outdoor therapy, to getting a walk in nature. So it's very beneficial for our well-being. And then as we think about hope and resilience as we're coming towards the end of our time together, I love this picture of the dog looking outside. He's hoping and waiting for his family members to come home. So when we have hope, we can look towards the future with optimism and with an expectation of something positive to happen. And we can also set meaningful goals, small, simple goals that we can set. And we can understand with hope and resilience who we are, what our resources are. And there was a study they did in Israel about hope and resilience during the pandemic. And they studied 3 groups of people. And what they found was that intrapersonal hope, that combined with a sense of coherence, were important factors. And that personal hope is, what do I have? What resources do I have? And how can I apply them? And those positive, hopeful thoughts will help to serve us to have significant protective factors. And people who can turn their pain and their suffering into strength and growth then can go on to do better. And so those are some other strategies And there's hope, if you got through a really bad time, you can get through another really bad time because you've built resilience skills. And I'm speaking as one who has gotten through a lot of really challenging life situations. And I never thought, some of them I never thought I could get through, but I did. And that gives you that awareness that, okay, I got through that. These are the strategies, and now I can get through something else. So the world is full of suffering. I love this quote by Helen Keller. The world is full of suffering, but it's also full of overcoming. And so we're going to close soon with some questions, but it's been an honor to serve you, and you can develop those. I want you to know you can develop those resilience skills. You can build them. There are multiple things you can do that they don't have to cost money. They don't have to take a lot of time. They're just little things you can do to build resilience skills. And if you would like to connect with me, you can reach me at Nancy Miller Coaching. You can follow my Facebook page at Navigate Life Coaching, or there's a link there that you can sign up for a download of self-care essentials on my website, or this one here will give you 7 simple self-care strategies. And we talked about some of those today in the presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop the recording in a moment here, and we're going to take questions. So if you have questions, we will stick around and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And if I don't know the answer, I'll let you know, and I will go ahead and try to get back to you if you give me a way to contact you. So I'm going to stop this sharing and we can stop the recording.